Paul here from My Perfect Failure, where we bring you real-life stories that turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. You might notice at the start of this episode, my voice was a little sketchy. I was recovering from COVID, but thankfully it clears up as I get into the episode. So, have you ever wondered if there's a deeper voice guiding your decisions? Dr. Victoria Shaw, psychologist turned intuitive counsellor, joins us on My Perfect Failure to reveal how listening to her intuition completely transformed her life. We'll explore how intuition can help you overcome fear, find your true purpose, and make bold moves even when the odds seem impossible. Stay tuned until the end as Victoria shares her inspiring journey and practical steps for tuning into your intuition and rewiring your reality and your future. This episode might just change the way you see the world and your future.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I'm super excited as I have another amazing guest for you. Joining us today, we have an Ivy League trained psychologist who combines her training in counseling and psychology with her intuitive gifts. She had guided clients worldwide in deepening the connection with their inner wisdom and living their light. She is the author of 4 books and host of the top-rated Intuitive Connection podcast. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Victoria Shaw. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. We were meant to have it a week ago. Picks up COVID. You were unwell. It felt like I wanted to have this conversation from when we first spoke about 3 months ago. So excited. Sorry.
Take care of you.
Sorry.
We're good.
Excited to have the conversation today. I'm fascinated with the subject that we're going to cover. I'm fascinated by it because I love the word. Don't understand the word. I found it difficult to say the word earlier. But I've listened to your content and I can see the impact that you have on people. And I'm, from a selfish perspective, I'm keen to understand the word and see how I can use that from a selfish perspective. But more importantly, I want the masses to understand more about intuition and how they can use it impactfully in their own lives. So I was actually thinking, should I be saying Dr. Victoria Shaw? Do you use doctor?
I use doctor if people are using my last name.
Yeah.
Because I never changed my name. I'm not married anymore, but when I got married, I never changed my name. And when people say Mrs. Shaw, I think they're talking to my mom.
Okay.
So I only use doctor. Like when I was doing my internship in a school, I was Dr. Shaw because Mrs. Shaw sounds like my mom.
Yeah.
But other than that, just Victoria.
Okay. Because I'm listening to your content, which is wonderful, by the way. I notice that people call you Victoria, but then I'm thinking, well, she's a doctor. Surely I should be calling her doctor. But maybe I should have asked.
I'm pretty informal.
Okay.
Just call me Mrs. Shaw and we're good.
Okay. So we had an amazing initial conversation. I really enjoyed that. It was a 50-minute just free for all where I got to know you, you got to know me, and I was excited that you said yes, I'd love to do the podcast. I won't lament too much because I want to get into your background and how you found your way into using intuition, but also helping clients globally with that, because your background is almost feels odd to me that you had all these qualifications, went to the best universities, had a wonderful marriage and wonderful children. So everything on paper was tick, 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 but it didn't feel like that to you. I might let you expand.
Yeah. So I spent my whole life, I've always been very passionate, passion driven, purpose driven. And my first passion and purpose led me to get a PhD in psychology, which I got from a very fancy Ivy League school here in the States, and worked my tail off and got to the end of that journey, met my husband, got to the end of my journey, and I just knew it wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. My passion was gone. And it took me about another decade to figure out why my passion for that particular pursuit went away. Like at the time, I just knew I didn't really love doing research, which was all psychology was about. And that to continue on that track, working that hard, doing something I didn't love didn't make sense. And then I also knew I wanted to start a family, and I didn't see myself. And my husband was also very, very ambitious. And I mean, it was like, one of us has to be with the kids. Like, that's just how I felt. Like, it just, if I don't love this, I'm not going to, sell my soul to do it. So I took some time off, started my family, started raising my kiddos. And it was in that process that I really lost myself a little more and then found myself, because my kids were struggling and I was struggling to be the kind of parent that I wanted to be. And when we are a parent, it has the opportunity to bring up all of those unresolved, ouchy things from our childhood, right? And that's what happened for me. And, I had never really thought about it before, but I did not have an easy childhood, and I didn't have the most adept parents. And I knew what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be there for my kids. And so in the process of figuring all of this out, I was started to be shown all of these out of the box weirdo people like acupuncture. I had a very, very out of the box pediatrician, thank goodness, who got me started on this journey, but he started to send me to people that did acupuncture. That was weird. And homeopathy, that was a little strange. You're giving people pellets of things that don't exist and it's helping them somehow. And then he started sending me to like energy healers and medical intuitives. And Paul, all this stuff was working. It was working. It was like helping. It was profound. And I also at the same time had this deep feeling, right? I had all this education. I had always been such a purpose, passion driven person, and I'd kind of lost my way. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a mom, but I also felt like, well, there's something more. There's something else I'm supposed to be doing too. And at some point, the light bulb went off in my head, because all these people were saying to me, you're very intuitive, that you could do this too, that, and I didn't. But the more I heard it and the more I saw how much it was helping, all those things finally came together and the light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, this is my thing. This is what I'm supposed to do. And the moment I made that commitment to intentionally connect with my intuition, everything about my life changed. It changed profoundly, and it changed for the better. And I've never looked back. I continue to listen to my higher guidance and my intuition first and foremost in every phase of my life, every aspect of life. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. It will just keep guiding you. And yeah, and I love to help other people do the same, because it's been transformative to me in my life. And that's how I got to be where I am today. And the other thing too that I want to share is that, because I think this is relevant to your listeners, is that one of the things that I realized after my intuition opened up, and about 10 years later now from being in academia, and I went back and I got a master's of counseling because it felt very aligned with the kind of information that I was getting from my intuition. So I have a lot of schooling, but when all of this was going on, what I really recognized looking back at my life and looking back at all of the things that I was rewarded for throughout my life, particularly in the academic world, I realized that all of those things actually came from my intuition, and they were all intuitively guided. And I didn't know what it was called at the time. I would sometimes talk about going to the place beyond words in philosophy class and like getting the information and then bringing it back and finding words for it. So that's maybe one way of putting it. But I realized my intuition had been with me my whole life, and it's with everyone all the time. I'd been using it quite readily. I just didn't know what it was called. And so I wasn't able to use it reliably or intentionally or consciously. And once I've learned to do that, wow, then it just blew the roof right off in a good way.
Well, that's quite a journey that you've been on. It's almost like a outwardly looking in,
Yeah.
all these light bulbs going off in your journey where you've got to this point where you've got clarity, found intuition, happier, more
Yeah.
content, letting your curiosity you take your life in a way in the direction that it needs to go to. So a second ago you mentioned that the intuition was there before you actually knew or understood intuition. So all the decisions you made about, I guess, psychology and a lot of the other decisions that you made before. Do you ever think about the kind of the paradox between it being there, but obviously you weren't able to put a label on it because you weren't thinking about intuition, but you were stressed and you were anxious during that period. If you'd have known that you were using intuition, would that have helped you, do you think? I'm not sure if I phrased the question the right way, but I'm hoping you'll be able to pick through the bones of what I'm trying to get at.
I think that having a framework for understanding, an expanded framework for understanding life would have helped me. For example, the way I understand intuition, and you don't have, it works either way. So you don't have to go here if you don't want to, but the way that I understand it is from a spiritual perspective. I really have a deep understanding that we're all spiritual beings and we're having this human experience. And when we come into this human world in about the first 7 years of life, we are trained and conditioned, in the most loving way by people that are already trained and conditioned and want us to be able to fit in, to forget our divine origins, right? We might have religion, we might have some spiritual framework. I did not. And sometimes that can be helpful. But at the core, a lot of times we forget who and what we really are, and we lose touch with our intuition. And so it can be a very lonely, stressful place because we lose that sense of purpose and meaning in the world, and we lose that sense of our own connection to our own inner divinity. So I think if I had kept that, right, and that broader perspective, oh, I'm part of everything. I'm part of all that is. I am wise. Life is happening for me. This is like a really fun party that my soul signed up for. Yay. And I have all of this wisdom and guidance at my disposal. I just need to learn to quiet my mind for a few seconds so that I can tap into it. If I had known all of that, after that first 7 years of my life throughout my childhood, yeah, I think that would have been deeply comforting. Yeah. Would have helped me navigate life in a different way. But life is a process of discovery. So, I'm grateful for every experience I've had because it brought me to where I am now, right?
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. So intuition, why is intuition important in our lives?
So the way that I understand intuition, because it's been used in a lot of different ways, and in the psychology literature in particular, I'm not a fan of how it's used because oftentimes intuition is considered the dumb cousin of your intellect. And intuition is all that unconscious stuff that you're picking up. You're not really thinking about it, but you know all of these things. It's your adaptive unconscious, and you're picking up all of this stuff about the world. There's some stereotypes in there, but some of it's really good. I don't think that's what intuition is at all. Okay, that's not how I use the term. To me, that's still your mind. You have, most of what happens in your mind goes on unconsciously below the surface. You make a lot of decisions without even knowing why you're making them, but they're not always inspired. They're not always inspired. Whereas intuition, I believe, is the voice of your soul. It's that little piece of you that remembers all the wisdom that you have as a spirit, having this human experience that you sometimes forget when the human shutters go over your eyes. And so that's a really different thing. And for me, when we learn to listen and tap into us, everyone has intuition. We're all souls having a human experience. Not everyone is going to be, their intuition is going to be as loud as mine has been. And I had full-on psychic experiences throughout my life. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be that loud. but we all have it. It's guiding us all the time. And if you reflect on any really good decisions you made, any things that really flowed into your life, any of those aha moments or areas where, you just are naturally good at something, you're naturally flowing, you're insightful. Those are the areas where, believe it or not, your intuition is really tapped in. And your mind may take credit for it because we've always been taught to justify anything we get from our intuition by explaining how we know it, because we've been taught that we know that's the way you know things is with your mind. But I would say that anywhere that you're really in the flow, things are going well, you have those aha moments, those moments of inspiration, it's always your intuition. It's always your intuition. So we all have it. It's just a matter of how using it more consciously, intentionally, and reliably. And giving it the due that it deserves, because it's really where all the gold lies.
Okay, that's interesting as well. I like that explanation because for me personally, it's given me more clarity about how to distinguish intuition compared to the chatter that was always going on in my head. And I'm always curious when I hear people talk about intuition prior to speaking to you, because when they talked about it, it always felt a little bit abstract to me. So I loved the results that they were intimating they were getting, but I was like, well, how are you getting the results? I love the idea of intuition, but I don't know how you're extracting the result. So your explanation there gives me, it's making it less abstract. It's making it more tangible in terms of the cues that I can look for. Hopefully people listening are getting that as well.
I can tell you more. You want more?
I want more. I want more.
Because that's the biggest question that I get, right, Paul, is how do I know the difference? Like, okay, now I believe this intuition is something worthwhile. And I have yet to find a person, maybe you're the one, but it hasn't happened yet, that hasn't had an experience in their life when they knew something, right? They knew it and they didn't know how they knew it, and they were right. We've all had those experiences. That's your intuition at work. And it speaks to us in lots of different ways, right? Sometimes it's a body sensation, that weird feeling in your stomach, like, I don't think I should do this, or that expanded feeling in your heart when you're like, I should do this, right? Or the chills when something really hits home, right? Or for me, I get a tear in my eye when something really resonates. Sometimes it's that clear, calm voice in your head. Just, all of a sudden you just have a bing, I think this is the right path, or I think this is the right way of looking at things, or I think this is what this person is trying to tell me, even though their lips are not making the words.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's a full body knowing. We just know. When I was pregnant with my first child, I knew she was a girl. I did not think she was a girl. I had a slight preference for a boy because I thought as a child growing up, it would be cool to have a big brother. So I wanted to have the boy first. But I knew she was a girl. I knew it so deeply that when I got my ultrasound, the technician or the doc, I can't remember who does an ultrasound, but whatever, the ultrasound guy looks at me and he says, do you want to know, the sex of your child? I actually asked him, what sex is she? And I didn't even know what I said, because I knew it was a girl, and my first child was a girl, right? So our intuition speaks to us in lots of different ways. One of the ways of learning to listen to it and trust it more is to start to reflect on and notice how it speaks to you. Right? Because once we start to pay attention, we will see it's happening all the time, because it's happening all the time. And then we can start to tune in and say, well, how does it happen for me? Because it's different for everyone. And then the other piece that really helps with the discernment process is intuition and the mind. They work very differently. I'm blessed to have, 4 years plus an undergraduate degree. So 8 years of studying the mind and how it works. That's what I did. I was a cognitive psychologist. That was my research. So I have a lot of information there. I know how the mind works, and it's different than how our intuition flows. And I also know from just my years of counseling training and just working with people that one of the hallmarks, unfortunately, of the human mind as it stands now is it tends to be very fear-based. It tends to be very fear-based. And so the first little clue that it's not your intuition and that it's your mind is if it has a fearful or critical or very negative flavor tone, right? It's not your intuition. It's not your intuition. People say like, I get anxious every time before I go on a plane. Is that my intuition? No, that's anxiety, right? That's a conditioned reaction, right? If even when I've had the instincts and the intuition that something was maybe not going to go the way I wanted it to, right? Something that might provoke fear, it's always calm and clear when it comes through, because your intuition comes from your spirit or your soul, a place where there are no emotions. So it's emotionally neutral. And, sometimes you might get that hit and then your mind kicks in and starts responding to it. But the initial intuition, it's always emotionally neutral and clear no matter what it's telling you. And most of the time, your intuition is not trying to scare you and not giving you bad news. Your intuition is pointing you towards the light.
Okay.
So I see you have more questions. So
it's fascinating stuff. I can't remember all the questions because every time you say something, I've got a question, I've got a question, I've got a
Oh
question.
no, all right, I'll try
No. Keep the pace and what you're kindly describing and explaining, because it's all valuable stuff. It's more valuable than my questions. I guess the thing that springs to mind: should we be trusting our tuition more than our minds?
Yes.
Once we can distinguish the difference between the both.
Yes, and more yes.
Okay.
It's a journey, and I have a very high level of confidence in my intuition because I have been doing this now purposefully and intentionally for like over a decade, and it always pays off. It always pays off. Right. So I have a high level of trust and confidence in listening to my intuition, so much so that, recently in the last 3 years, I moved across country, started a new business about which I knew zero zip and nothing, and left a 30-year relationship, all following those inner nudges. Right. And it's working out okay. It's working out just fine. But I don't recommend other people necessarily do that. Right? Like you can go slow. You don't have to take these big grand gestures. In fact, sometimes we don't even want to, right? And that is totally fine. But I want to come back to the question. But yes, I believe your intuition always tells you what's true or the most aligned path for you in the now, or what will bring you the most joy, and it's always in the now. That's really important because your intuition comes from spirit, soul, source, a place where there's no time. So it's a moving target. Okay. So it's always telling you what's true or best for you in the now. And that can change. And sometimes it's just a little step.
Okay.
Right?
So with that being said, intuition you mentioned is in the here and now. So when I get that intuitive feeling, once I've developed the skills that you have, will I get more adept at being comfortable with moving with that idea, whatever's comes into my brain at that time. I don't know if the brain's the right word, because I guess the brain, I don't know how the brain is linked to intuition, what that relationship is.
Yeah, the way that I understand it and the way it's been explained to me is that for my spiritual support team, but also for some smart human neuropsychologists that I happen to know, the brain's like a filter. So it filters out our broader awareness. Some people, my good friend Chris Niebauer, who's a neuropsychologist who talks about kind of a spirituality in the brain, he says a lot of intuition is right brain. It's correlated with right brain behavior, but it doesn't come from your brain. Your brain is the receiver.
Okay.
But to your other question, you use your intuition all the time. You and everyone else, but you specifically. And for you, whenever you follow that pop of inspiration, because I see this about you, and I hope that's okay for me to share.
Yeah.
And you listen to it, it always pays off for you. Now, can I continue? Because I'm reading you just a tiny bit.
No, continue.
Yeah, you tend to be an overthinker. So you will have that pop of inspiration and then you will question the heck out of it. It's sort of like a dog that gets a bone and the bone smells really good, but it's not just enough to know that bone smells good. You want to chew the crap out of it so that you're really, really sure that it's
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's okay, because it satisfies your mind. It's not necessary because that first sniff has told you whether this is something that you want to chew. Does that make sense? So that's specific for you, but it's coming through probably satisfy listeners too. So a lot of times the mind is really great. The mind helps us flesh things out. The mind helps us find words. Like I said, for me, and this was years ago, sitting in philosophy class, which was my double major, I would literally in the conversation, imagine I would have the sensation, and Einstein's talked about this too. So I don't just me and him, no, but I'm just kidding. It's a thing. It's just the way that I understand it. But to go to that place beyond words, I would access this deeper knowing. And then, but I would have to come back, right? And I'm sitting in philosophy class. So it's not enough that I just went to this magical place and got the answer, right? For the next cool thing to add to the conversation, I would have to find words for it. And our minds help us do that too. And our minds sometimes help us elucidate and understand what our intuition is giving us. So I love having a mind. It lets me have conversations with you. It lets me be part of this beautiful consensual reality and do all the fun things. I just don't take it as seriously anymore. I use it as a tool of my intuition as much as I can, rather than being used by it. But for most of us, we get lost in the mind. So we get that initial hit. And then sometimes in the process of kind of chewing it over, we chew it so much that we can't find it anymore.
Yeah, I think I do that.
Yeah. But for you, I think a lot of times, you do hear it and you do listen to it. It's just that there's a certain amount of mentalization that needs to go on before you can agree that, okay, I can do this now.
Yeah.
And that's just your process. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, I think with me, and I'm not this is all new to me, so I'm learning, but I think I will have an idea or the intuition's kicking in, but I feel personally that I let the mind override that initial intuition where I'm getting the joy, I'm getting the adrenaline, and my natural instinct is to lean into the fear, lean into that's not something I've done before. That's not something I have lots of experience with. Let's stew on it. Let's rationalize it, whether it be in my own head or whether it be speak to somebody else who potentially has no experience in that field either. So I'm not really
Other people
speaking to the
don't
right
usually
person.
have your answers.
Yeah, so I'm kind of speaking to somebody that is in the same lane as me, that's that's why this conversation, I wanted to have it, because I want to understand intuition. I want to understand the mind better, how they coexist, how I can, put them in the places they need to be to help me live the life that I want to live.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we all have that deeper knowing. We know when things resonate. We know when they feel good. But from the time we got out of the gate, most of us, the people in our world, did not show us how to value that, how to use that, how to trust that. In fact, most of us have had at least one, but often many experiences early on where you came to a caregiver or a teacher or an important adult or person in your world and you knew something and you knew it from your intuition. And they looked at you and you said, you can't know that. How do you know that? Why do you think you know that? Right. And we shut it down. We didn't believe it was safe. Right. And sometimes, kids intuit something about their parents, right? That their parents don't want them to know, like, Mom, are you sad today? And mom's like, I'm not sad, And so we close it down. And so part of this is giving yourself permission to start to listen again and, trust it bit by bit by bit. Because again, we live in a world that favors the mind and says, this is where all the gold is, but it's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. And the mind is a great tool, but if we don't keep it in its proper place, then we become the tool of the mind, which is a much less fun way to live.
Yeah. Really interesting as well, because it's counterintuitive to how most of us think. Because I listening to your content, I was thinking around when you're at school and maybe we're not listening properly, or we do something stupid at school, and the teacher or lecturer might say, "Can you just use your mind?" Something like that.
Yeah.
And so I guess the reason I say that is because it's reinforcing the mind to us, to students, to children,
Yeah,
to
again and
say,
again and again.
yeah. And then but they don't talk about intuition. I don't say, Paul, use your intuition. But
Right.
that probably, I can't think that was ever said to me. So the intuitive instincts that can be our guiding light are kind of buried, because even maybe parents don't, you can't be everybody's parent. So I guess you can, because of what you're doing now. You kind of are
But
educating
to some
people.
degree,
Yeah,
sure.
but
But we
it's
can be
not.
our own parents too.
Yeah. So this is why this is super interesting. So do we need to get to the point where we develop these skills? Should we be practicing intuition daily? What does that look like?
So usually the first thing I tell people to do, I have 3 steps when I teach intuition development. So it's pretty simple. And the first one is to pay attention. Just pay attention to where it's already happening for you, because it is. It is. And even I get these inspirations, but then I question them, right? But you know what the inspirations are. And we know. And so when you start to just look for it, it's like I always give that example. You're trying to buy a new car, right? And you think like, I don't know what kind of cars they have over where you are, but here, a popular car is a Toyota Prius, right? And suddenly you're like, I'm going to buy a Toyota Prius. And I'm really looking at that car. And all of a sudden you're driving on the highway and every car is a Toyota Prius. They're everywhere. You've never seen this car so many times, because what we focus on grows. And it's the same thing with your intuition. It was there all along. When you start to pay attention to it, you're going to notice it more. And then the more you notice it, the more you're going to get some information about how it's already working for you. So that's the first step. Just be open, pay attention, notice, and you will be shown. And then step 2 is, and we've already talked about this a little bit, learn to tell the difference between what's your intuition and what's your mind. Intuition messages are always loving. They're always positive. They may not tell you what you want to hear, but they will not scare the pants off of you. They're not fear-based. They tend to be calm. They tend to be subtle. There have been times in my life when I get a very strong hit of something that I should really, really do. And it feels like something is just wanting to move through me. And it's almost like, I can't stop. I can stop. I'm in full control, but I kind of don't want to. But those times are actually pretty rare. Most of the time it's very calm. It's very quiet. It's very neutral. I know it's my intuition, but I also know I have, complete and total free will, and that I can kind of tune in, and I don't worry about it so much, because if I miss one message, I'm going to get another one. It keeps flowing, right? So you don't even have to act right away. Your intuition, it's not going away just because you're not listening to it. But as you do listen to it and do pay attention, you will strengthen that connection and hear it more readily and more easily. So the second step is just knowing the difference. And again, that's just about discernment and learning how it speaks to you, and then understanding the difference between your intuition and your mind. And then the third step, and that's what we're really talking about here, is to learn to trust it, because we haven't been taught to trust it. And we can do that in baby steps. Like I said, you don't have to make the first choice that you make does not have to be moving cross country, leaving a marriage, starting a new business,
Yeah.
which you have no background, all because your guidance is strongly pointing you in that direction. Though I've done that and it seems to be going just fine. But there are all those little things and little steps that we can take. It can be going into the grocery store without a list and saying, today I just want to feel like what aisle I feel called to. Where does my attention go? Right? And you may discover something that you've never, like the best tasting cookie that you ever had in your life by following your intuition. And that's fine. That's beautiful. That's part of what it's here to do. So we can start small. We can start, we can start every morning tuning in and asking, getting quiet. Quieting the mind is really important, because intuition and your mind don't usually mix. And again, most of us spend a lot of time in that highly chattery state. But when you are very anxious or very overthinking, you tend to block out the space from which your intuition comes through. So practices that still the mind and quiet the mind will amplify your intuition. But one really nice practice is in the morning when you wake up, quiet your mind, do whatever practices. Your mind's usually quiet when you wake up, so this helps. Take a couple seconds to just ask, well, what do I need to know today? what's one little pop of wisdom that will benefit my day? Write down whatever you get. Don't judge it. Don't try to figure it out. Sometimes we shut down our intuition too by trying to figure it out. Sometimes our intuition, it's a little bit, it speaks to us in code. It speaks in metaphor. Sometimes it's just a little pop and you don't get the whole answer all at once, and you have to be comfortable with that, because sometimes you can't absorb all the answer at once. Or, if your intuition started to tell you too much, it would invite your mind to take over. So write down whatever you get. And you're going to find that if you practice this every day, over a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months that you get into that flow, you're going to find that some amazing wisdom comes through for you. And you're going to also discover more and more. You're going to open that channel, and you're also going to discover more and more uniquely how your intuition guides and speaks to you, because it's different for everyone.
Okay, fascinating. So in terms of capturing things, I think you've kind of answered the question. So when we have those moments when your intuition is kicking in, should we be journaling or to try and capture it so we don't forget it?
We can. First of all, like I said, intuition is the gift that keeps on giving. We don't have to look at it from this lens of scarcity. Like if I don't grab it now, it'll be gone forever. Okay. Your soul doesn't give up on you. Your higher, it will keep coming. The pings are always there. But sometimes it can be helpful to write it down if you get something that's really like, wow. I have a voice recorder on my phone, and sometimes I just go for walks and talks with my guides, because I think about myself as chatting with spiritual beings as well as just tuning into my own highest guidance. And that may or may not resonate with you and your listeners, but sometimes I will go for an intentional session. For me, my mind stills when I walk and when I'm in nature and when I'm near water. So I'll go for a walk. I have beautiful trails by my house, or a walk at the beach, and I put on my voice recorder and I kind of talk to myself and I see what I get, right? But sometimes too, I'm getting like a download for my podcast, or I'm thinking about a problem and something comes through. I'll just put it down in my little voice recorder. Most of the time I never play it again. Every once in a while I'm going for a walk and I feel like hearing what I was thinking, a month ago or a year ago, and I listen to those again. For the most part, I don't even really need to, but there is something about writing something down. I think that's helpful to us, that now we feel like we grabbed it, but I don't think that you need to.
Okay. And is that part of the trust that when we're in flow with intuition, it just happens and we will engage it the way that we will need to engage it based on that high level of trust around intuition?
Yes, and more yes. And trust in yourself too, to be that receiver of all of the goodness that comes from who and what you really are. So yes, and more yes.
Do you feel once, maybe you can use yourself as an example, once you had that watershed moment and you became more aware of intuition, is it almost like a superpower that you've got this ability to understand the relationship between intuition, your mind, and all the other component parts, so you're able to use them in the most impactful way for you?
I think so. Yeah. And for others as well. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know that it was a watershed moment. I know we love to have watershed moments. For me, there was a lot of watershed moments, that all kind of, came together until one moment I was like, oh, wow, look at how much my life has transformed. But basically that we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. And for people that might be listening to this now and are thinking, I 100% want to explore this, and I don't know whether this is my mind thinking as well. So when we have, I think I know the answer, because I think you've given us so much already, but sometimes we've got family, friends around us. So when we are thinking, Paul, I really want to explore intuition, I feel that definitely it's missing. It's a missing component at the moment. Should we learn to be, maybe we don't have to broadcast it, if we want to make those small steps daily, because maybe if we broadcast it to people, if they're not on that path, not on that journey, their mind is going to lead them in their own fear, which they can pass on to us.
Yeah. I mean, I think whenever you're starting to tap into your own truth and your own wisdom, and that's what your intuition is, you want to be really careful of what you share with others,
Yeah.
because your relationship with your intuition is between you and you. And it doesn't mean that, I have trusted others that I tune into. Some of them are other intuitives and psychics, by the way. But I always vet it with my own experience. I always see, does this resonate? Does this fit? When I have clients and they come to me, and basically what I do is use my intuition to receive guidance for them out of my lips for, 20, 45 or 60 minutes, right? I always start every session with a new client saying, look, you have this too. And you have this ability to know what fits, what resonates. So even if it comes out of my mouth, and even if a lot of what comes out of my mouth astounds you, because I know things that you're like, how the heck could she ever know those things? Like, she must know a lot of things. I don't have your answers or your truth. Like, I am the conduit or channel between you and you. And I always tell my clients that means that you have to be in the driver's seat to see what fits. And, I invite you to do that for sure if you're in a psychic or intuitive reading, which is my jam, but also in everything, every bit of information you get from the world, you have this inner discernment to tune in and say, does this feel right to me? Does this fit for me? If the answer is no, it's a no. It's a no. It's not your truth. And it might be someone else's truth. And, when I started doing this work professionally, I was doing two things, because as I started to awaken my intuition and I started to see clients, what I recognized was a lot of the information that was coming through felt counseling-y to me. I would see things like, when you were 4 years old and that thing that happened is why you're having difficulty now. And at the time, already being a research psychologist, I wasn't a clinical psychologist, but I had a PhD in research psychology. I kind of felt like, ooh, I want to have some clinical skills here. I want to have some clinical training. I want to maybe have a license so that when this stuff comes through, I know what to do with it. So I went back to school and I got a master's of counseling. So I would have that clinical degree as well. And so when I started practicing, I was doing two very different things. I was building my intuitive business, and I was also getting my licensure hours for being a counselor in a very traditional place, right? People were not coming to me because I was an intuitive counselor at this point in time. They were coming to me for therapy. However, my intuition was there, right? I would see these things. I would know these things, right? And I wasn't going to sit on my hands and not use them. And I believe anyone who's practicing counseling or really anything in the world well is using their intuition, whether they know it or not, because that's where all the gold is, right? So I would learn how to say things to people in a way that I didn't say, like, I'm getting an intuitive psychic hit right now about this thing that happened to you when you were 12. But I might say something like, tell me about what happened to you when you were 12. Did something, or sometimes, things that we have now come back to experiences we had as a child. Did you ever have an experience like this as a child? Or, if someone was coming complaining about their husband, and I have some 411 because I can intuitively ping and tune into their husband, I might say something like, I wonder if your husband is the kind of person that sometimes does this. And they'd be like, oh my God, yes. Right. And I'm telling these stories because I want you to know, like, it doesn't matter where the information comes from. I'm not in the business of convincing other people that this stuff is real. But I don't want to be in that business. That is not a fun business to be in. And when I don't usually attract those clients, but if I do, like, I'm like, hey, it's take it or leave it. Like, you want to know if I have the goods. And if what I say resonates with you. But I don't have to prove to someone this is real or not. But if people are already on board, then I can give them the tools and strategies to tap it for themselves. And if they're not on board, that's okay too. That's okay too. That's their truth. I respect that. I don't need to change that. And this is the important piece. I don't need to make it about me, right? Everyone in the world doesn't have to agree with me for me to be able to agree with myself.
Yeah, totally. And it must be very interesting for you. I guess every client is different, as you're different. So we've all got our own journey today, and we've all got our own independent journeys that will manifest itself in the future. But But when you start working with a client and you start to see that level of development, that level of finding their flow and finding their jam, that must be quite a feeling for you when you see that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing when people find that. And like I said, it's different for everyone. And when I teach intuition development too, I have the ability to tune in and help people find their zone of genius, right? Like, because again, intuition is the gift that keeps on giving, right? Your intuition will show you how to further develop your intuition. I know that seems like a catch-22, but it's actually not.
I love that idea. I love that idea.
It'll just keep guiding you.
Yeah. So when you practice, do you practice when you want to, or do you just do it? Or do you have I don't know, a regimented practice, or can it be anything?
Both. Both. When I'm doing a session, I always start with a little prayer. I've been saying the same prayer since I started, and I don't know, I still love it, and it gets me in the zone. So I say my little prayer. I kind of say I set the energy for the session, and then boom, 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 it just, the guidance will start flowing. So that's how I set the container for my professional work. And I think that's important too, because, I don't want to, sometimes a client will come in and they'll be like, I had a headache last week, but you know that. I'm like, no, I don't know that. Like, I'm not omniscient. I get what I need to get in the context of our sessions. And every once in a while, my guidance will, if someone's really struggling, my guidance will ping me and they'll just keep popping into my brain. This happens to all of us. And usually if a client, especially if it's someone that I haven't thought about for a really long time, pops into my brain 3 times, then I will reach out and say, hey, you're on my radar, just checking in to make sure.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I'm here. But like, I'm not constantly monitoring or, usually it's like you leave my office. I love you so much and go live your life.
Yeah.
So, in that respect, I'm pretty clear about when it's on and when it's off. Like if I'm hanging out with a friend, every once in a while, if they're talking to me about a problem or something, I'll ask, hey, something's coming through. Do you want to know? Because I'm just naturally like that. But, I'm not, it's not the same way as, turned on if I'm working with a client. In my own life, I just trust. I get the pings when I need to get the pings. And sometimes if I'm really stuck on a problem, because again, when we're really, and I didn't talk about this, but when you're really attached to something, when you are really, invested in a particular outcome, when you have a lot of emotion around something, it tends to make your intuition less easy to hear.
Okay.
Intuition works best from a place of non-attachment, from a place of neutrality, right? So your intuition will always be neutral. It'll always be take it or leave it. There might be a pull in a certain direction, but your higher self doesn't care what you do. It loves you no matter what. But human selves, right? You have a podcast called My Perfect Failure, right? We put a lot of investment into what we do and getting it right. And when that's really loud, it's hard for even me to hear my guidance. So in cases, sometimes I will seek outside support, because sometimes somebody else is going to see something that I don't see because of my blinders on. That's why I do what I do for people, right? But sometimes I need others to do that for me. Sometimes I'll meditate, quiet my mind. And a lot of times I do these walk-in talks where I basically give myself a session. So I go where I know my mind is going to be quiet and I start asking. I know it looks a little weird, but fortunately now when you have headphones in, no one really cares if you're talking to yourself.
You can be singing to yourself or talking to yourself.
But I'll ask my guidance questions as if, a client is asking, and I'll get answers. So that's my process. That's gleaned over many, many, many years of doing this. But it works really nicely. And sometimes too, I'll ask for guidance in my sleep. And sometimes too, and this is, I think, the biggest way that we can ask for guidance when we're feeling really, really stuck and really, really attached. You ask for it and then you completely let it go. Just let it go. Stop scratching at the problem like an itch. Just let it go. What happens when you scratch an itch?
Gets sore, doesn't it?
It's not that great, right? I know it itches. I know you want to scratch it, but sometimes it's better just to let it go. Focus on something else. Think about something else. Your answer will come, but it can't get to you when you're overthinking, over-mentalizing, over-attached, over-anxious. So you have to let it go in order to receive.
Yeah. And I guess when I don't know this, but I'm just a question. So when we overthink it, is that the mind taken over as well? So
Absolutely.
it becomes less about the intuition, more about the mind.
Yes. You won't even hear it through all that noise.
Okay. Okay. So that's an interesting one as well. You know, as you kindly pointed out, podcast My Perfect Failure. So lots of people, we all have our challenges, but we've all had good moments and all had a lot
Yeah.
of difficult moments. So that's a nice tool for us to know how to use in those
Yeah.
difficult moments. Just ask the question, but don't spend too much time with it because
Ah.
it's not going to do the job.
Yeah, it'll come. It'll come in that peaceful, quiet moment when you're not looking for it.
Yeah,
And it'll
okay.
come sometimes in surprising ways. Sometimes it'll come out of someone else's mouth,
Mm,
but it will come. But in those moments when we're really feeling emotional or attached, or I don't know, or even that conundrum of, and I have an episode where I did this, it's hysterical. You know, how do I know if it's my intuition or not? Right? And you're just back and forth. I don't know. Is it not? Is it? That's mind. When
yeah.
you're in your intuition, you know. And when you are trying to figure out if you know, just take a step back because you're not going to know from there.
I could literally talk to you all day. Literally talk to you all day.
It's
It's
fun.
it's so it's so fascinating. So for people that obviously I'm about to link to your podcast and the show notes, but obviously you're helping clients, you're helping them tap into their intuition. And I think I heard something where you talked about, what did you, I think I wrote it down. So intuition is our spiritual GPS. I think
Yes.
I love that phrase. So you're helping people get in touch with their spiritual GPS. So if people want to work with you or find you, how should they go about that?
Yeah. So all of my goodness. So I do teaching to help people connect with their intuition. And I also serve as a conduit or channel for your guidance because again, sometimes when you hear it out of somebody else's lips, then you really can hear it.
Mm,
So I do a lot of that. So I do what I call intuitive coaching or counseling, where people come to me. Sometimes it's, very mundane things. Like I have clients, that come to me for business support. Or it can be like a personal challenge, or it can be what's the next direction in my life? How do I navigate this relationship? How do I work with my anxiety, right? So all of those things, your intuition is guiding you on everything. Your guidance is always there for you. So I can receive messages and guidance for people, not just on tapping into their own intuition, which will always happen in the course of these sessions, because when you're aligned and entrained with what I'm doing, you're hearing your intuition more and more. And so it's an added benefit of this kind of work that your intuition will get louder for you. But in the meantime, I can receive guidance for people, which people find really helpful. And I also do teach widely to help people, just directly hear their own intuition and understand how that process is working for them. And you can find all of that information on my website, which is Victoria Shaw, and Shaw is SHAW, intuitive.com. So victoriashawintuitive.com. You find all of my classes, all of my teachings. So you can find all of that on my
mm,
website and the
okay.
podcast, which
Okay.
is Intuitive Connection.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put all the links on the show notes. So very easy for people to
Yeah.
find you, access, get in touch. Obviously, you do lots of wonderful interviews that are on YouTube as well. So, so there's loads of wonderful
Yeah. And I have
content.
one more thing.
Absolutely.
And it's not going to be up on my website yet, though I don't know when this is going live. But I just recorded my first TV series.
Wow.
That happened last week, Living in Alignment, and that will be on the Soul Search TV network. And from there, it streams to Amazon, Apple, and Roku. So look for Living in Alignment with Dr. Victoria Shaw. They wanted me to put doctor on
Doctor
there.
this time. Doctor.
And so that's going to be launching in September also. So I'm
Okay.
really excited about
Yeah.
that. And then eventually that will migrate to YouTube after it's done
Okay.
being.
So for people that are looking to start the process, I guess they can subscribe to your content. I guess there's newsletters as well as stuff as well. So
Yeah,
that
all good stuff you can get on my newsletter. I have a free Activate Your Intuition book that you can download, which will also put you on my
mm,
mailing list.
yeah.
So there's definitely some free content there too. And then we have 4 years of podcast episodes all on this topic.
Okay.
And so, that's completely free and out there and ready to consume.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think this has been an amazing episode. What I would love to do is have more conversations with you, because
Anytime.
I think that this is what I like about this subject is it's one that I kind of gleaned at the start of it, that for a lot of us, we view intuition a little bit abstract. We're not sure how to latch onto it and use it impactfully for us. What I love about what you do, you're making it tangible, understandable, so we can separate intuition from mind and all the other bits and pieces that are going on, which I think is important, because that can really help us transform our lives and really lean into the things that we want to do, like that GPS you talk about, as opposed to maybe we do things that are fear-based that don't really fulfill us. And that's why we see all the angst everywhere, particularly in the US and in the UK, where we just don't have the ability to go with anything that isn't mind or fear driven.
Amen.
Okay. Amen. Okay. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're always looking to grow the show, so please do hit the subscribe button if you aren't watching on YouTube. And your feedback is really welcome. So we're keen to hear about the things you like and equally the things you don't like. So you can find me at Paul at myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the contact page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.